man. Hey, it's great to meet you. Thank you so much for taking a minute out today. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Happy to talk.
So let's get into your life as a VC investor, founder, and a hardware geek. All of these things that make up who you are. But before we do that, I want to cover living through this pandemic. Really, kind of shifted a lot of things for all of us.
Yeah.
How much of those seismic waves from that time period are you still feeling today in 2025?
So, from a venture capital perspective, I'd say we're still definitely feeling the effects, but it's not necessarily what people thought when 2020 first hit. When 2020 first hit, we saw a lot of people that were worried that it would actually hurt startup creation. And that ultimately, as we can, looking back, we can see that was not the case. We had a ton of new startups that were being funded, a lot of new capital being injected into the venture capital ecosystem with zero interest rates. And what we saw is instead of a lack of companies, we saw a ton of companies and a ton of money that was going to companies that probably didn't deserve it. There was massive funds being raised and a lot of new first funds being raised. And what that led to is people needed to deploy capital. And so they deployed more capital than maybe they should have. They deployed it at valuations that were somewhat inflated. And I would say that the main thing that we're seeing right now is the effect of that overvaluation. And that comes in a couple of different ways. So the first thing that we see is a sort of resurgence of down rounds, where companies are now going to raise and they raised at a really elevated valuation in maybe 2022. And the capital just isn't there to support those companies anymore. So investors are moving to a more value-based strategy where they still want to see growth, but they're picking the companies that have the highest potentials for good cash flow and to um, really sort of tightening what they believe is a good investment. So that is, I would say, the first thing. The second thing is our firm deals a lot with we do a lot of first money investments. And we're seeing new companies benchmark themselves to valuations from 2021, 2022. And because those are the companies that exist right now, the ones that were funded back then. And it's a different environment and the money just isn't there. And the chances of hitting a down round, if you raise, let's say, $5 million seed round or pre-seed round at $30 million valuation, that step up funding just isn't there. And we're seeing that as when it comes to the point where you need to raise 10 to 20 million, the firms are really, really ratcheting down on valuations. And so I'd say those are the two biggest impacts we've seen coming out of this COVID era.
And that's the thing. During that time period, we all came to this kind of philosophical, existential crossroads where we all had to figure out our lives and what we wanted to do. So it seems to me as though, from a business standpoint, it just sharpened that edge a little bit more. People got a little bit more clarity on where they want to invest and how much money they want and what they're going to do with the future. Is that kind of true?
I think so. I think that you it was just COVID was such a unique time period, and so people reacted in a bunch of different ways. And now you're seeing sort of a leveling off and a sort of come to Jesus moment of, okay, we might have been pouring money into enterprise SaaS companies. Now we're looking towards AI, and you're seeing a lot of these sort of trend hopping VCs not doing so well anymore. And especially as it comes time to raise a second fund.
But AI just popped up out of nowhere. It was just like all of a sudden, that's all anybody. I mean, because we knew about all these Google Home devices and Alexa and those kind of, like minor league sort of kind of things. And now it's this major thing that's happening.
It is. It's been really incredible and fun to watch.
Yeah.
And I feel fortunate that our firm focuses mainly on hardware. So we don't have to, I don't feel a lot of pressure to get involved in AI deals just for the sake of getting into AI.
Yeah.
We can kind of take a step back, look to see what's going on, and try to be a little bit more diligent in how we deploy our funding. And we do look at AI deals, and we're interested in getting into potentially a pure software play. But I think just the benefit of focusing on hardware allows you to step back from those trends and kind of take a bigger view without feeling the need that you kind of need to be in there hustling for deal flow.
Years I'm an IT technician for a school district by day, and I remember going to an Apple certified class years ago. This has been like 8, 9 years ago. And the guy that taught the class was brilliant. And he was like, "Do you guys ever wonder why Apple software is so cheap?" And we're all just kind of trying to come up with this profound answer. And he was like, Apple's a hardware company. They don't care about, I mean, they want functional OS, iOS,
Mhm.
but they're a hardware company. And it was just an epiphany that just, it was like an anvil came out of the clouds because it's true. Like
Mhm.
literally any OS you get is cheap. It's easy to install. It's done.
Yep,
What was $20, whatever it is. But it's amazing how when you look, being a guy that's into hardware, when you look at all these companies and what kind of premium they put on the hardware that we all rely on, it's interesting to see what their real focus is.
absolutely. Yeah, I think the past 20 years or so of software dominating venture capital, dominating this the entrepreneurship ecosystem has been great. It's created a ton of value, jobs, it's boosted our economy. But I think that as we continue to grow, people are recognizing that software can't solve all of the world's problems. And we need to have as a country and as a world, we need to support that engine of hardware development if we want to really progress. And I think that we're starting to see a bit of a shift as deep tech and hardware starts to come into the limelight a little bit more.
So let's get to the heart and soul of what you do on a daily basis. I'm going
Yeah.
to put you in front of a bunch of grade school kids. It's career day, 10 or 11-year-olds. And one of the kids in the back of the room is like, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" What's your answer?
So the first thing I tell people is that if they've ever seen the show Shark Tank,
Yeah.
that's sort of like a very compressed version of what we do.
Yeah.
Um, I people pitch their businesses to me and they tell me how much money they're looking to raise and which milestones they'd like to raise with or they'd like to hit with that funding. And then we do due diligence to determine if that fits our strategy and if we sort of believe the story that they're telling. And that really boils down to talking to their potential customers
Yeah.
and validating that we see a lot of really smart people come with very cool ideas. And unfortunately, just combining a cool idea with a smart person who wants it to make it happen isn't enough. You really need to have that market pull. So I'd say that's a big part of my day-to-day job is looking at the companies that have pitched to us and then digging in and trying to see if they're to really validate that market pull and to see if what they're telling us about their customers is true.
So when you were in the third grade, what did you want to be when you grew up? What was your dream?
That's a good question. Back then, I probably would have wanted to be Batman. That
Yeah.
was that was my
Superhero.
that was my goal as a kid. And as my dad was an entrepreneur though, and I saw what he did and I saw kind of the value he provided, and that was something that was sort of what got me into entrepreneurship. But I do remember when I was his company exited right around when I was in the third grade, and one of his VCs invited us out to see a space shuttle launch in California, and that was sort of my first time meeting VCs just as a little kid and that I think is what kind of gave me that spark of, oh, maybe I would like to be an investor. This seems really cool. They brought us to the launch because they had invested in some technology that was contributing to the shuttle launch, and so that to me was really cool.
At that age, that had to be mind-blowing to see something like that
It
happen.
was incredible. I feel very blessed to have been able to experience that.
That's wild. I think one of the more, when we talk about the pandemic and kind of these collective calamities that happen, I remember being in the eighth grade when that shuttle went up in 86 and the aftermath, because all of us kids were in junior high and we were going to watch Christy McAuliffe do an actual lesson. Like we were waiting for that moment. So there was such a heightened anticipation that wasn't just, oh, another rocket's going up. We're going to
Yeah,
put another satellite into space. This was like really getting into the marrow of our kid guts, and we were going to see something cool, you know? So, but I will never forget that night, no matter what you feel politically, one way or another. That speech Reagan gave that night was crazy good. Just it's that command of having a leader calm everybody down was huge. Because I remember he said something like,
imagine.
they were going up to kiss the face of God in the heavens and just kind of all this eloquent language, and it just
Mhm.
calmed us down. We were just like, okay, all right, we'll be okay.
That is that's one of the beauties that of kind of finding that silver lining and in tragedy
Yeah.
and how strong leaders can kind of contribute to that.
Yeah. So I understand that your dad was an entrepreneur and this was kind of a part of your DNA that was woven early on. But when did you realize this was your path in life? This was going to be the journey you were going to go on.
So it was probably right around COVID. So I did my PhD, or I was doing my PhD and finishing up as COVID hit. And when I first started and was applying to PhD programs, my idea was that I wanted to be a technical founder. I really just enjoyed um, the passion that you see when you work with other entrepreneurs. And I loved the experience that I had doing my startup. And I just thought that, okay, if I can get a PhD and really learn how to grow technology out of the lab, I can be a great technical founder. And turns out I actually hated doing research. And I realized by about my third year that I did not want to spend the rest of my life in a lab, even if it was focusing on commercializing technology. And so when I finished my PhD, I was kind of a little bit lost. And I was like, okay, I've done all this work. I don't want to throw that away and just go do something I could have done if I skipped my PhD. And so I did some soul searching and kind of settled on two potential paths that would allow me to use my skills as a PhD scientist and also the skills that I had learned as an entrepreneur founding my first company. And that led me to either technology transfer and venture capital. And I was very fortunate to get a job in the tech transfer office at the University of Colorado, called Venture Partners. And they're a little bit unique in that they focus almost entirely on startup creation as a tech transfer office. They, instead of focusing on out licensing technology to larger companies, they provide a ton of support to their early stage entrepreneurs. And I was a part of that support network, coaching really, really early stage, not even companies yet. It would usually be like a professor or PhD student files an invention disclosure with the university and wants to build a company around their invention. And I would meet with them, work with them. I helped run an accelerator program and really enjoyed doing that. But I hated working with the patent bureaucracy system, which is something I had to do. And so that led me to my current position, where I met the two founding partners of the firm, and they brought me on as an associate to help with their investments.
So, who's been that hero for you, that bedrock for you in your career that's inspired you?
I would say there's a couple people. I would say first, my father.
Yeah.
He's just really, it's been just besides just the emotional support he provides as a dad. I think when I did my first startup, you don't know who to trust, you don't know who gives good advice, you don't know who to talk to, and so just having him as sort of a conduit for that really really helped. The next person I would say is my PhD advisor. Despite the struggles that I had during my PhD, he was just phenomenal and really taught me one of I think the most important skills, which is management. And one of the things I noticed in working with him is every time I met with him, I might go into a meeting feeling anxious because I wasn't making the progress I felt like I should have, anything like that. And no matter what, I would always leave a meeting with him feeling so much better, feeling optimistic because we had talked through a plan And that's something that I've really taken with me as I work with early stage entrepreneurs, because we can't invest in everybody. But I always like to, I don't want somebody leaving a meeting thinking, oh, this was a waste of time. They said no, this is just a loss. I want to be able to provide some insight, something to help them pitch so that their next pitch is better and help them improve. And so I'd say that's really been helpful. And
So we kind of talked a little bit about sports before we got on here.
yeah.
And the thing about business is it's kind of akin to that. We're always looking for that superstar that's going to rise up, like a
Mhm.
Jeff Bezos. What company, what entrepreneur exists out there in the world that you look up to that maybe you would like to meet, spend some time with that would help you in your journey?
So I was asked a very similar question about 12 years ago when I was becoming an entrepreneur ambassador at my undergrad college, NC State. And the person I said then was James Cameron, who maybe might not be thought of as a traditional entrepreneur, but if
Yeah.
you look at what he's done for underwater exploration, the companies he's built, the submarine companies, he's just incredibly curious and just to me emulates somebody who embodies curiosity and then does something about it. And I think that that answer stands true today. He's not somebody who sort of toots his own horn in the entrepreneurship or investment community, but he just does the quiet work to improve things that is to me really important. And also, I think when we had that issue with the submarine a couple years ago, that to me sort of embodies the hubris of some entrepreneurs. He was there in the background providing insights and sort of talking to the common people about how this can be a safe industry and the work that you can do to ensure that underwater exploration is safe. So I think James Cameron would be my answer.
And not to mention making probably two of the most grossing, intriguing films of all time, right? I mean, that's it.
Exactly. I say what you want about the storyline or whatever. He really pushes the boundaries of technical movie development
Yeah.
and for his own benefit and for the benefit of the craft.
For sure. So let me ask you this. What is the motivation for you every day to wake up to do this work that you do, to help your clients, but to also evolve as a human being?
So I really think that my answer would be helping impactful technologies get out of the lab and into the world.
Yeah.
And that's just really what kind of keeps me passionate. It's so exciting to see some of our early stage companies, and again, the companies we invest in take a long time to make progress. When we invest, it might be 5 years until they hit revenue.
Yeah.
And because again, we invest in hardware, but it's so rewarding to see, for instance, battery investment that we led their earliest round is now getting grant funding and building this coalitions within the community and is getting mentioned by some of these national programs for funding. And so that's really exciting to see. And as we continue, I look forward to seeing these technologies actually provide a tangible benefit to the world.
So let's say you have a dream tonight. You run into that earlier version of you when you started college,
Mhm.
not quite sure what you were going to do yet. And you could give that young version of you a piece of advice based on this life you've lived so far, the wisdom you've accumulated. What advice would you give that young version of you?
Say I was very stressed through my 20s about things that I maybe didn't need, just worrying.
Yeah.
And just I would tell myself to take a step back and really focus on the things that I enjoy doing. I think I especially in my undergrad, I think I did a little bit too much to meet like external expectations instead
Yeah.
of focusing a little bit more and work. I think I worried too much about maybe getting perfect grades or something like that, which I didn't ultimately have. And just kind of say everything's going to work out. Like you're smart, you're working hard. That's generally enough at least in your early 20s
Yeah.
to be somewhat successful.
So as a hardware geek, and I have an answer that I'll tell you after you're done. What is your favorite tech hardware gadget of all time?
I I'm gonna say the iPhone.
Which
It's
one? Which version?
so I think the current one. Like I just
Okay.
I've always I was in line to get the iPhone on the very first day that it launched, and it's been sort of my main tech tool since then. And I just, it's a great product.
Yeah.
It works for me, does everything that I need. I know there's lots of reasons that you might like Androids or whatever, and but I just feel like it works for me so well. So
Mine is the 4, and it's because it was boxier and
mhm.
blockier, and it was the iOS was before everything started coming at you like a force field. But I still remember when the iPad came out and everybody was taking pot shots at it. Why is it called a pad? But you know what I'm saying? Everybody was
Yep.
like, is this going to make it? And within like 6 to 8 months, it was the top selling tech gadget of all time.
I do love my iPad. I've
Yeah.
got I just I don't upgrade or I barely upgrade because there's never any reason to because it's just
Yeah.
such a just a good product.
Yeah, totally. So, of everything that you've done up to this point in your life, what are you ultimately the proudest of?
I think um, some of the early work I did with my startup Undercover Colors is was just I feel really proud about, even though the company ultimately ended up failing, I feel really proud about the work that we were doing and the problem that we were trying to solve. So just for context, we were initially raised funding to create a nail polish that could detect date rape drugs in a drink.
Wow.
This was a problem that exists on college campuses and ultimately even beyond college campuses. And when I was in college, we found that people were kind of treating it as something they worried about, but almost as a joke.
Yeah.
And so our goal was to bring a product to market that people would use, that they could discreetly test their drink. And the sort I'd say really the marketing, like getting to understand that target market and learning about being empathetic to all the different issues that come with marketing a product that is based around safety. That I'm really proud of the work that we did. And despite the fact that we couldn't bring the nail polish to market, we did bring the first test that tests for the entire spectrum of drugs that can impact the central nervous system. And even though it wasn't necessarily the greatest product, I'm proud of the work that we did. And I learned so much in that time. And so that's I think what I would be most proud of currently.
It's interesting. I think more like a creative than anything else. I wasn't like a born entrepreneur. It hasn't been in my DNA, but I respect it and I'm learning more about it. And I remember at one point someone told me, if you go in with the idea of making $1 billion, it's going to be a detriment. But if
Absolutely.
you know what I'm saying? But if you go in thinking I'm going to solve a problem,
Mhm.
and what you're doing, you're solving a problem. And it just seemed it made total sense to me. It was like the light bulb went off, you know?
That's a great point because one of the quotes that I really like is, as an early stage entrepreneur, don't fall in love with the solution, fall in love with the problem.
Yeah,
So because especially at the very beginning, the first solution that you think of or that you iterate on is not likely to be the one that you ultimately bring to market for any various reasons.
yeah.
And so if you get too attached to your initial idea, you're going to end up missing out on sort of the ways that you could tweak that to really respond to the market that you're trying to sell to.
So at the end of the day, everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, clients, colleagues, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
I think I'm somebody who's helpful. That's my main goal, especially at this stage in my career. I I've learned quite a bit through what I've done, but I'm also still eager to learn. I think venture capital especially is something that you get into it and you learn just constantly throughout your career. So my goal is to distill some of that knowledge and provide it to people who can use it.
So if anyone wants to reach out, learn more about what you're doing, get involved, where's the best
Yes.
place to do it?
I would say probably my email is I'm Tasso at Buff Gold Ventures. Relatively easy to reach through there. You can also find me on LinkedIn, Tasso Von Windheim. I think I'm the only Tasso Von Windheim.
Yes.
Um, But I love talking to people who are considering becoming an entrepreneur, maybe are an entrepreneur looking to raise their first round of funding. I probably can't invest in you because we can only invest in companies that have a connection to University of Colorado. But I still love to talk with entrepreneurs outside of that sphere and give you some advice. Try to share some of my knowledge with how you might be able to become more successful.
Tasso, this has been wonderful. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your time. Thank
Excellent.
you for your
Thank you so
story.
much, Joe.
Yeah. Have a great 2025, man.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care.